I'm probably friends with him on Facebook if they have one.
Why didn't you tell Mr. Sergeant McGuire that Miss Capps had been to your home only about a month previous?
I didn't feel it was terribly pertinent because I had used the term friend. I mean, friends hang out with each other, they spend time with each other, and by using the term friend, I thought it encompassed that we might have seen each other at some point in time.
Why didn't you tell him about the hubby and wifey comments between you two? You and Kelly Capps.
Between Kelly Capps and myself, they were not anything beyond playful friendship. They didn't strike me as anything significant. I regularly, I think I had explained before, give nicknames to people and call them by nicknames and whatnot. Whether it's a male or a female, obviously some are specific for sex, or gender, let me rephrase that.
Thank you.
But even female friends or significant others of male friends, they can still have nicknames that, if taken out of context, someone may have an assumption about. But I don't think anything of them, and neither do they, because there's an established friendship and they know that it's not anything more than that.
Now, when you discussed with Miss Capps at the family restaurant what happened that night, and you observed bruises on her, did you tell her you would let her know what was going to happen?
I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. Are you inquiring as to if I told her that Stephen could go to jail for it? I'm sorry, Stephen DeHutt could go to jail for it, given the nature of what he did?
Yes.
Yes.
Did you tell her that you would let her know if that happened?
I believe so, yes.
Now, at some point after Mr. DeHutt's arrest, you text messaged Ms. Capps and told her, I think it says something like, just to let you know, I'll put your boyfriend in jail tonight.
I don't know if that's the exact wording, but I did text her to advise her that Stephen was going to jail.
Okay, I may be off my word. Why did you send that text message?
To keep, again, she was a friend of mine and I wanted to keep her updated as to what was going on.
Okay. Now, you failed to put on your incident report the body of documents necessary to facilitate arrest. You failed to include in there a statement about let me rephrase the question since it's not coming out well at all. On the form that you have in front of you, the form dealing with Mr. DeHutt's arrest, is there any indication of whether or not Miss Capps gave a statement?
I don't have a stack of paperwork that's the report. On the domestic violence form, I believe it's called domestic violence form, it might be domestic violence sheet or DV sheet, there's a box, or a section of boxes where it inquires if the person needed medical attention or if not, and if they refused it. There's also a box that says, did the victim provide a statement? And it gives you options to check off. One is written, one is verbal, etc.
Well, while I'm finding that, let me ask you some additional questions that are off topic. Sir, you've admitted that you committed a number of violations of the county's policies and the sheriff's policies, haven't you?
Yes.
Now, you recall having that pre-disciplinary meeting with the sheriff, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I guess during the sheriff's testimony, you remember the sheriff being asked about a quote that you allegedly made during the course of that. It's right there next to you, sir. You remember giving, him giving
Please don't
testimony.
step on that, because that's the microphone that's taking everything down.
Obviously, I didn't intend to.
Well, I know, but I want you to back up is all I'm saying. I realize you didn't mean to pull it off the table, but I didn't want you to step back and inadvertently step on it.
I didn't realize it was behind me.
You're asking me about the pool bench.
Let me try to start again. You see that document in front of you where it states that you stated in the predisciplinary meeting, I can't argue the decision you made, being the chair, I understand it. You see that?
Yes, sir.
Do you dispute that you made those comments?
That sounds consistent with something I would have said.
Now, despite the fact that you made those comments, did you agree with the sheriff's decision to terminate your employment?
No, sir, I don't agree with it, and I severely dislike it, obviously. It affects me greatly.
Well, let me stop you there. If you didn't agree with the decision, then why did you make that quote during the course of the predisciplinary meeting?
Again, things taken out of context can be skewed just about any way you want. I can't argue with the decision the sheriff made. It's not my place to argue with him, and arguing will make me no headway. I severely doubt going in there and making a scene will help in my favor. And I do understand that he's terminating me. And I also understood that some of the infractions that I had are subject to dismissal. But that doesn't mean that I think that the decision was the proper course of action.
Why don't you think the decision was the proper course?
I didn't feel as if what I had done wrong was severe enough to justify a termination. Could I have used better judgment on some stuff? Absolutely. And that's my cross to bear, and I admitted everything that I remembered having happened. But I think of myself as a good deputy. I think of myself as a good person. The other people I work with seem to think, worked with previously, seem to think so as well. I still to this day get phone calls from guys who are on duty who have questions about how to do things. And I just approved for FTO school and whatnot, so to me it seemed that I was performing well within my duties. And I had really hoped that, given the nature of what had happened and my track record, that there would be some leniency or some punishment shy of termination. It's especially considering some of the stuff like that you had brought up earlier as far as other disciplinary actions.
Involving other deputies?
Yeah, I personally didn't feel as if my infractions were as egregious as some others that were punished more light-handedly.
Or what you thought was more severe activity?
Yes, sir.
Now, what do you expect out of this pension, not pension board, I'm sorry, personnel board?
I obviously didn't come here to waste the board's time and try and convince you that I didn't do anything wrong. I obviously did some things wrong. I just pushed to go to this point because I knew it was the next appeal to hopefully get the termination changed, to either get my job back and be reinstated after a suspension or something of the sorts, or just overcome the termination aspect.
I don't have any more questions this time. I'm going to follow up after Ms. Jones.
Mr. Deane, so let me understand this relationship. You have an 18-year-old girl that's just graduated from high school, works as a waitress in a restaurant. You're a 29-year-old deputy going in there while you're working, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I was trying to do the math to verify that I was either 28 or 29.
Okay. You were a good bit older than her, you would agree, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's your testimony today that you started calling her wifey because she called you hubby first.
Yes, ma'am.
Did it ever occur to you that maybe you should have told her that really wasn't appropriate for her to refer to you when you were in your uniform on duty in that way?
Had it occurred in front of a group of people to where it could have been seen as a lack of respect, I would have heard the action. I never thought anything more of it than just friendly banter.
Well, and didn't you think that would lead her on a little bit?
No, ma'am.
Yeah. You've also testified that she started that hubby and wifey and all that kind of stuff. And referring to the text messages that you had that night with her, isn't it true that after you were driving to the jail and texting while you were driving with a prisoner in your car, at 3:33, she says, "I'm sorry for bugging you," and you say, "Darling, you never bug me." You think that's appropriate for a sworn deputy sheriff to talk to an 18-year-old girl that way? Yes or no? You think that's appropriate?
The term darling is not meant to be inappropriate.
And then you follow up with, "You're my wifey, you're never a bother." You don't think that was inappropriate with an 18-year-old girl?
No, ma'am, I didn't think the age had a particular bearing on it. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine and didn't feel it was inappropriate.
Let's talk about this friendship. You testified a little while ago that you expected, I may not have written this down exactly, but you expected Sergeant McGuire to know that you don't use the term friend lightly?
Do you use the term friend lightly, ma'am?
I'm asking the questions today,
Okay.
Mr. Deane. You
That's
told this board that you don't use the term friend lightly, so when you used that term with Sergeant McGuire, did you expect him to know the extent of your relationship with her without telling him all of it?
I did not expect him to have ESP or anything of the sorts, no. I used the term friend because there are many other words within the English language that I could use that show a less significant attachment or involvement with someone.
Isn't it true that several days before, the day that the incident happened, that evening, that December 11th, that you actually asked, that was then Deputy Whitener, but now it's Sergeant Whitener, you asked him about whether or not he thought it was a conflict of interest, and he told you it was, didn't he?
Do you have paperwork so that I can verify that?
Sure. You did read all,
You remember or you don't?
you had an opportunity to read all the statements before you gave your sworn statement, isn't that true?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you would have read Sergeant Whitener's report, or his interview, excuse me.
Prior to my second IA interview, correct?
You've read it, is that correct? You did talk to Sergeant Whitener about the incident with Stephen DeHunt and Kelly Capps, didn't you?
I did talk to Sergeant Whitener behind the district office.
Okay, and
Go ahead.
it's yes or no, you did talk to him
Yes, ma'am, I have
Okay.
talked to him.
about this incident, about the fight between Kelly Capps and Stephen DeHunt. You spoke to him the night it happened, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am. I did speak to him the night it happened.
And he knows both of those parties, doesn't he? Kelly
Correct.
Capps and Stephen DeHunt, doesn't he?
Yes, ma'am.
And he was more familiar with your relationship with her, wasn't he?
I
Hasn't he
can't
been?
speculate on how familiar he is with anybody's relationship.
Okay, well, I'm asking you, had he ever been in the restaurant with you before when you were up having dinner or eating up at the restaurant, Sergeant Whitener?
I believe so.
And he knew Kelly Capps and Stephen DeHunt, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, he had been the Pearson unit prior.
And based on that, when you asked him about a conflict of interest and you being involved in the domestic violence investigation, he told you you shouldn't do it yourself, didn't he?
I don't think that's the case.
He gave a statement on April 19th of